The ocean waves pounded against the shore as I stood on the deck of my grandmother's beach house, breathing in the salty air. This could be the last time I'd ever stand here, at least. That's what Victoria Thompson, my mother-in-law, wanted to believe. I'm Sophie Chin, and this is the story of how I outplayed one of Boston's most ruthless real estate moguls at her own game. This house had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandmother, a brilliant contract lawyer, had bought it in 1975 for what was now an unfathomably low price. Back then, this stretch of Massachusetts coastline was quiet, untouched by the millionaires and their megamansions, but she saw its potential before they did. Remember, Stewie, she'd tell me during long summer afternoons, in law and in life, the devil is always in the details. She taught me to read every contract like a puzzle, to understand that the most dangerous clauses are the ones people overlook. I never imagined how much I'd need those lessons. I inherited the house 2 years ago when she passed. By then, I was already married to Michael Thompson, the golden son of Victoria Thompson, CEO of Thompson Luxury Properties. Our marriage had been a whirlwind, me, a commercial property lawyer, him, heir to one of Boston's largest real estate empires. Victoria disapproved from the start. Old money doesn't mix with new, she'd said at our first meeting, eyeing my off-the-rack blazer with the faintest curl of her lip. She never let me forget where I came from, middle-class parents who were teachers, who sacrificed everything to put me through law school. But it wasn't until I inherited the beach house that she showed her true colors. The property, now worth over $12 million thanks to the area's booming development, had become her fixation. It was the last missing piece in Thompson Properties' planned luxury resort. She started with charm. Think about your future with Michael, she'd coo, all faux concern. This house is holding the family back. Then came the offers, insulting ones, less than half the market value. I refused. That's when the pressure began. First, accidental construction damage from Thompson Properties' nearby projects, mysterious foundation cracks, broken windows from stray debris. Then, the taxes. Overnight, my property value doubled on paper, the tax burden nearly impossible to manage on a lawyer's salary. I knew Victoria had connections in City Hall, but proving it, another story. Michael, stuck between loyalty to his mother and his wife, tried to mediate. Maybe we should sell, Sophie, he said one night, his voice careful. Mom's offering a fair price, considering the house's condition. The condition that had miraculously deteriorated only after I rejected Victoria's offers. I held my ground. My grandmother had spent decades fending off developers and legal threats to keep this house. She'd trusted me to do the same. Then came the night everything changed. Victoria invited us to dinner at her Beacon Hill mansion. A family reconciliation, she called it. I knew better, but Michael insisted. The dining room was a display of power, dark wood, glittering chandeliers, waitstaff moving silently in the background. Victoria sat at the head of the table, her silver hair impeccable, diamonds winking at her throat. Sophie, darling, she purred, signaling to her lawyer. A folder slid across the table. I think it's time we resolve this unfortunate situation. Inside was the property deed. Sign it over to Thompson Properties, and all our problems disappear. $5 million, cash, and a position at our firm, junior counsel, guaranteed. I glanced at Michael, he stared into his wine glass. And if I refuse? Victoria's smile cooled. Then I'm afraid things will become unpleasant. She leaned forward. The city is investigating structural concerns about your property, environmental issues. If they decide it's unsafe, it could be condemned. My pulse quickened. And Michael? She continued smoothly, glancing at her son. Well, he has a bright future in the family business. It would be a shame if this complicated his inheritance. Michael swallowed hard but said nothing. You have 10 minutes, Victoria said, sliding an expensive pen toward me. Sign, or we destroy you, professionally and financially. I have friends in every law firm in Boston. Good luck finding work after this. I picked up the deed, flipping through the pages as Victoria watched, smug. Page after page of legalese, ownership transfers, conditions, clauses. Then I saw it. Page 7, subsection C, paragraph 4. My grandmother's secret weapon. Hidden in plain sight. I smiled and reached for the pen. Wait, Michael finally spoke. his voice uncertain. "Sophie, you don't have to. It's fine," I said smoothly, signing my name with a flourish. "Your mother wins." Victoria's laughter rang through the dining room as she snatched up the deed. "I knew you'd see reason eventually," she said, a smirk tugging at her lips, "though I must say, I expected more of a fight. If only she knew what was coming." The next few weeks passed in a blur. Victoria wasted no time announcing Thompson Properties' final acquisition. Architects were hired, investors lined up. Michael grew distant, caught between guilt and relief. I waited. The press conference was set to be her crowning moment, a grand reveal of the luxury resort, attended by local media, city officials, and every real estate player in Boston. That morning, I sat in my office downtown, streaming the event live. Victoria, flawless in a designer suit, stood at the podium, selling her vision. Then, a commotion. Her lawyer hurried onto the stage, face ashen, clutching page 7 of the deed. Victoria's practiced smile faltered. "What do you mean, historic preservation clause?" she hissed, forgetting her mic was live. I leaned back, satisfied. My grandmother had been playing a long game. I opened her old diary, a faded blue ribbon marking the page. April 15, 1975, filed the Historic Preservation Covenant today. Ironclad, buried in the deed restrictions, any future owner must maintain the property in its original condition, no demolition, no major alterations, the perfect protection against developers who think money can buy everything. The covenant was binding. It ran with the land, not the owner, no matter who held the deed. The house had to remain unchanged, protected by state preservation laws. Victoria's $100 million project had just collapsed. I grabbed my bag and headed to the press conference. They had invited me, likely expecting me to watch Victoria's victory. Instead, I arrived to chaos. Investors whispered furiously into phones. Reporters scribbled notes. Victoria, flanked by her legal team, radiated fury. She spotted me instantly. "You knew," she spat, eyes blazing. "You knew the whole time." I shrugged. "Of course I did. I'm a property lawyer." "Victoria, did you really think I wouldn't read my own grandmother's deed? The same grandmother who was one of Boston's top real estate attorneys?" "This is absurd," she snapped. "We'll challenge it in court. A preservation clause from the 70s, please." "By all means," I said, pulling out my briefcase. "Here's the original covenant, filed with the Registry of Deeds. Here's the property's listing in the State Historic Register, dated 1976. And these? Letters from 3 preservation societies confirming its protected status." I laid the documents down, one by one. Victoria's lawyer flipped through them, his expression darkening with each page. "Mrs. Thompson," he said stiffly, "this is airtight. It was properly filed, continuously enforced. Any legal challenge would be a waste of resources." Victoria's fists clenched. "Then we'll sell," she snapped, "take the loss and move on." I sighed, almost pitying her. "About that," I said, tilting my head, subsection D restricts future sales. The property can only be sold to direct descendants of the original owner, my grandmother. Otherwise, it reverts to a historic preservation trust. Victoria's breath hitched. Her empire had just crumbled. And I hadn't lifted a finger. I paused. "I suppose I should thank you for saving me the trouble of explaining all this to your investors at once." The ballroom had gone silent. Every eye was on us, reporters, investors, city officials, the queen of Boston real estate, exposed. Victoria's breath hitched. "Why?" she whispered. "Why let me go through with the purchase if you knew? Because you needed to learn that money doesn't always win, that all your connections, threats, and manipulations can't overpower someone who knows the law and refuses to back down." I gathered my documents, letting my words sink in. Then, with a casual glance toward Michael, I added, "Oh, and because you forced my husband to choose between his inheritance and his marriage. How's that working out for you?" A flicker of movement near the door caught my eye. Michael had arrived, taking in the scene with wide eyes. He looked between his mother and me, realization dawning like a slow sunrise. "The house," he said, almost to himself. "You weren't just fighting her, you were protecting what your grandmother built." Victoria turned on him, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare take her side after everything I've done." "Everything you've done?" Michael's voice rose. "You mean like sabotaging Sophie's career, vandalizing her property, forcing me to choose between my wife and my future. A breath, a decision. He walked over and stood beside me. I choose my wife. For the first time in her life, Victoria Thompson looked small. She sank into a chair, her empire of intimidation crumbling around her. The reporters would have a field day. Boston's most ruthless developer, outmaneuvered by the daughter-in-law she tried to destroy. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift. Victoria's investors abandoned Thompson Properties, wary of her tactics now laid bare. The mysterious property damage stopped. My tax assessments returned to normal. Michael and I moved into the beach house. He took up surfing, something he never dared try while living under his mother's thumb. We talked about the future, about children, about raising them in the same sunlit rooms where my grandmother once taught me about justice, patience, and the power of an ironclad contract. Victoria never spoke to us again. But her power over our lives, gone. A month later, she announced her retirement, citing health concerns. Thompson Properties underwent a massive restructuring, with Michael stepping in as the new CEO, committed to more ethical business practices. As for me, I started my own law firm. We specialize in protecting small property owners from developers like Victoria, from people who believe money can bulldoze anything in its path. On my desk sits my grandmother's old diary, its pages worn but her wisdom timeless. April 15, 1975. Filed the Historic Preservation Covenant today. Ironclad, buried in the deed restrictions, any future owner must maintain the property in its original condition, no demolition, no major alterations, the perfect protection against developers who think money can buy everything. The house still stands. Untouched, unchanged, unshaken. On quiet evenings, as the sun melts into the sea, I sit on the deck with my grandmother's legal files, uncovering new layers of her brilliance. Remember, Sophie, she wrote in her last letter, the law is meant to protect what matters, not just property, but principles. Use it wisely, and it becomes a shield that no amount of money can break. Last week, a young lawyer came to me, desperate to save her family's restaurant from an encroaching developer. As I helped her uncover the legal tools to protect her legacy, I saw my grandmother's lessons echo into another generation. Michael joined me on the deck that evening, watching the waves roll in. You know, he mused, I never understood why this house meant so much to you until now. It's not just a building, it's a statement that some things aren't for sale. I leaned against him, smiling. Your mother taught me something too, I said. When people show you who they are, sometimes the best response is to let them keep talking, while you quietly read page 7. Because in the end, power isn't in money or connections. It's in knowing the rules better than the people who try to break them. It's in patience, strategy, and a well-placed legal clause, waiting for its moment. Every morning, I walk along the beach, watching the sunrise cast golden light over the house. Developers come and go, fortunes rise and fall, but some foundations, like love, truth, and a carefully worded contract, are built to last. And somewhere, I like to think, my grandmother is smiling. As for Victoria, they say she's writing a book about real estate development. I sent her a note suggesting she pay special attention to page 7 of her publishing contract. Some lessons, after all, take time to sink in.